Welcome to the Global Pulse, a short video series where our experts break down a trending topic in international business and why it matters to you.
As I'm sure you're aware, in what was billed to the voters as an advisory referendum, in June 2016 UK voters narrowly voted in favour of the resolution that Britain should leave the EU, or Brexit. Somewhat surprisingly perhaps, the referendum didn't require a supermajority to determine the outcome, and more importantly, the question had not clearly specified what was meant by Brexit. David Cameron, the Prime Minister who'd allowed the referendum to occur, resigned after the result, revealed 52% had voted in favour, and Theresa May became Prime Minister. For the next couple of years, the UK public were told by her that Brexit means Brexit, and while this was a succinct expression, it left many listeners no wiser. Nevertheless, she did negotiate the so-called withdrawal agreement with the EU, and by the fall of 2018 it was ready for ratification by the British Parliament. The key part of the deal was the so-called Irish backstop that guaranteed that there would never be a hard border with the customs controls on the island of Ireland between Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, and the Republic of Ireland. Northern Ireland would, in effect, be treated as part of the EU single market for customs purposes. The agreed absence of a customs border on the island was a key part of the Good Friday Agreement, also known as the Belfast Agreement, that had been signed in April 1998 and brought an end to the so-called Troubles that had plagued relations between Ireland and the United Kingdom for at least 30 years, arguably more, maybe since the early 1900s. The agreement to have no hard border was not at all controversial at the time because back in 1993, the European Union had abolished all border controls between member states. Now, understandably, the EU wants to regulate the quality of goods coming into the EU, including Ireland, because once the goods are in any member state, they can then be transported without regulation to any other part of the EU. And the EU is particularly concerned about controlling or regulating foodstuffs, including chicken and GM crops, which might be exported from the USA to the UK, including Northern Ireland. Absent border controls on the island itself, there'd be no controls over goods coming into the EU at that point. Therefore, the corollary of there being no border on the island of Ireland, and the UK being able to make its own trade deals outside the single market, because it was outside the EU, is that there would have to be, in effect, a border in the Irish Sea between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. And so this part of the withdrawal agreement was objected to by those MPs who saw it as potentially leading to Northern Ireland ceasing to be a full part of the United Kingdom. So, after having failed several times to persuade Parliament to ratify the agreement, in March 2019 Theresa May resigned as party leader and hence Prime Minister, and her successor was Boris Johnson, who had been a key leader of the opposition to the withdrawal agreement. He renegotiated a new draft withdrawal agreement with the EU and replaced the Irish backstop with a new protocol that was, in any event, essentially similar. There was still the potential for a de facto border in the Irish Sea. But even with a three-line whip on his own party, his revised version of the withdrawal agreement did not receive approval because the Tory administration was dependent on the support of MPs representing constituencies in Ulster. Johnson argued that the electorate should have a say in resolving the stalemate, and Parliament did agree to holding yet another general election, the third in just over 4 years. Maybe if the Labour Party had had a better leader, the outcome would have been different, but as it was, the election result was that the Conservatives were elected with a large overall majority. The revised withdrawal agreement was then approved by all parties, the UK government and the EU, and it took effect from the end of January 2020. Finalising negotiations was slow during the spring and summer of 2020, but eventually the inherent self-inconsistencies of the withdrawal agreement could no longer be ignored. And so in September 2020, the UK government introduced its Internal Market Bill, which, they acknowledged, breaches international law. That is, it seeks to unilaterally change the terms of the withdrawal agreement that the parties had agreed to less than 12 months earlier. In particular, the new bill ruled out there being a border in the Irish Sea and thereby potentially opened the possibility of there being a requirement for a border on the island of Ireland if the EU wanted to maintain control of goods coming in. And, as noted earlier, this would be in breach of the Good Friday Agreement. And in response, on October the 1st, the European Commission began formal infringement proceedings against the British government for breaching good faith through its internal market bill. As of now, we have a high-stakes game of chicken. The EU does not see the need to renegotiate for a third time the withdrawal agreement. The UK government is currently refusing to accept it as the basis of an agreement. And if no agreement is finalised before December 31st, or the deadline is not extended, which is not impossible, the UK will crash out of the EU without any agreement beyond World Trade Organization rules, and there will be massive disruption to the trade, which is very significant for both parties. Meanwhile, perhaps because of increasing revelations about nefarious factors affecting the original referendum, and the increasing realisation about the likely effect on the UK economy, opinion polls now show that support for Brexit has fallen to only 40%. And there's now majority support for Scottish independence, whatever that might mean in practice. Watch this space.